Welcome everyone. So today we are looking at the self and the space. The self and the space. Okay. All right. So what we have here is the self and the space in in between the self. Not only is it in between the self, but it's also around the self, above the self, below the self. It's an encompassing space that gives the self the environment to express itself. So basically, the self is a compressed, if if space can be compressed, if that is possible, then the self will be the result of such compression. And then if you pay attention to the space in your present moment right now, you would notice that it is it is something that is silent. It is a silent phenomenon happening. Inside of that silence happening in the present moment, sounds too are occurring. So two illogicalities are going on. Okay, there is silence happening. Okay, it's happening. It's not um, silence is not the end of anything. It is the engine powering all there is. Silence. Okay, and it is happening. Okay, so that's like what you notice when you pay attention to the present moment. Okay. And then it has this silence has so many layers. It appears to me to be like 12 layers. Okay. So, but the point is that inside of inside of something that's supposed to be silent, this is supposed to be a silent box, right? And then the box is just for demarcation purposes. The box itself does not exist, but let's use it. So this is a silent box, and inside of that silent box there are thoughts, there are sounds going on inside of it. Sounds are happening inside of the box of silence. I mean that's the way we know that silence is happening, because the sounds that are happening are indicators of what's going on inside of the container, which is which is the silence of the mind. Okay. So so can space contract itself? The only way it can contract itself is through the sounds, going on inside its container. That's the way for space to contract itself. So at the beginning we asked the question, if space can control itself, if space can compress itself rather. So the way for space to compress itself is through sounds. And the sounds are not happening because they have no effect per se on the container of the space. Okay. All effects that the sound may have or may appear to have is all illusory. So that way we know that the sound too is illusory. The sound is not there, just appears to be there. Okay, but this appearance is solid enough. Okay, the appearance of sound is solid enough. That's why we can hear them, we can feel them. We can feel sounds, we can hear sounds, we can see sounds. Everything that has any form whatsoever, even if it's etheric form and all the rest, all that forms, higher consciousness forms, as long as it has any sort of form, then it is carrying the appearance of sound. So everything that moves is sound expressed. Okay. So this is our container of silence, and then inside of it is the sound waves. So can this sound wave become so complex? Can we get to a point where this sound wave becomes so complex that it has the ability to be aware of its nature? It has the ability to reflect, to look back, to check, to see. Alright? Okay, so when there are waves upon waves, and the waves so there are waves upon waves, and the waves getting complex. They will get to a point where the sound waves can become so complex that it becomes self-aware. It becomes aware of being. Okay. So that complexity is what we now know today as man. Okay, that's guys or girls. Okay, so we have become self-aware, and I would like to use the word carefully. This word self-awareness, because it's anybody who can see or hear and can talk and knows that they are, would assume that that's all self-awareness is all about. But self-awareness is knowing where you are. And where are you? Where am I? Where are we? Okay. So we are like in a jungle of meaninglessness. And then inside this jungle, we have this group of people who come together and say, okay, let's make a meaning out of this meaninglessness. And hence the community begins. Okay. So the community begins from tribal communities, the ones we have in Africa, um, to complex communities where there's democracy. But whether it's the complex communities or the simple community, it doesn't really matter. The point is that we found our likeness and we decided to stick together. Okay, there are other forms of existence out there, but because our likeness is similar, that brought us together to keep us together. Okay, so in the same way, the waves in the silence act. So they gather themselves together and attach themselves to what feels um, to their likeness, to their similarities. Okay. So at the end of the day, um, such a community, say the community out there, or personal community, which is the community of self, because you are not, we are made up of many. We are one being made up of many. So a singular being just who is just looking outside is actually a compilation of multiple beings. Okay, and those multiple beings are around the singular being, and then they work like, then they work in a sort of hive mind mentality. So that happens for everybody that is. Okay. So what happens is that space or silence inside of its nature forms, sounds are existing, sounds are happening. Okay, so if you want to prove that, you can simply try to meditate. You sit in a state of, you be in a place of meditation and you sit, and then you will notice how your thoughts are always going on inside of that mind, even though that same mind can be as silent as the grave. That same mind can be completely still with one or two thoughts here and there. You know, it can be completely still with little to no thought processes. But if you have not been meditating, then you wouldn't notice the silence, the space around. You wouldn't notice the space. And if you don't notice the space, then there is no room for growth, because the space is what produces growth, spiritual growth. The space is also likened to so many things. Yeah, and people who have more space are more patient. People who have more space are more kind. They are more thoughtful. They they don't jump to conclusions so quickly. So there are so many things that understanding the space can do for you. So if you're somebody who is angry, who gets angry so easily or anxious, by paying attention to the space in your present moment, little by little, no sudden, no sudden magical transformation. Okay, but little by little, this compressed space, which is the self, okay, the compressed space will begin to decompress. It will begin to decompress as the compressed space observes the silence in the present moment, which is this space. Okay, so this signifies the invisible vibration in the present moment. Okay, so that is the nature of space. Space appears to be invisible and appears to be vibrating, it appears to be moving. And the reason why we can know for sure that space is moving is because the objects inside of it are moving. All the objects inside of space have the ability to move. Your thoughts moves, your emotions moves, your feelings, sensations move. Everybody moves. Talking is a movement. Um, Doing anything in particular, going out, coming back home, everything moves. Okay? So if that's the case, that everything moves, even trees and rocks, even if you don't touch them, they move due to um, geographical activities of the earth. They all move, right? So the point is that if the object in this space, in this present moment moves, if we are if they have been discovered to move independent of our actions, then the space itself is moving. But while the space is moving, it's also not moving because our eyes can see that. Okay? Our eyes can see that it is invisible and that invisibility doesn't go anywhere. Okay? So that is the invisible vibration that the eyes can see. So let's imagine that there is a cup right here. So usually the guy, the self, we ignore all the space here and just look at the cup directly. Okay, the cup is the primary subject in this case. So it looks at the cup directly and forgets what is going on around. Okay, but by paying more attention to the space, you realize that the cup exists inside of the invisible vibration. So we are all existing inside the space, inside the invisible vibration, and if that's the case, then we have to reinvestigate what seeing is. What does seeing really mean? Okay, and soon you realize that seeing has nothing to do with what you see with your two eyes. Like the two eyes has nothing to do with it at all. Okay, it, the two eyes are like very old tools that we use to move around, but they are very old. Okay? Because seeing has nothing to do with objects, that your eyes looking at an object in space. Because from this explanation, where we place all sounds inside the container of silence, okay, then seeing or the eyes is part of the invisible vibration. The eyes are part of what is vibrating. So everything here is vibrating, and then the eyes is vibrating in a specific way that enables the invisibility of space to be experienced without the ego knowing. So there is an ego inside this guy. Okay, so there is an ego. There is an ego inside this self that does not um, that is like it works like a cloud. The way the cloud blocks the sun, that's how the ego works. It works like that. And so the clouds blocking the sun in this case are images, thoughts, emotions, feelings, etc. Okay, so like for example this cup, um the self looking at this cup will see only that cup in the image, and it will just think of that alone. So the ego is the limiting factor here. It limits perception to images, thoughts, emotions, feelings. Okay? But if the self can recognize the limitlessness of its existence, as the self begins to recognize that limitlessness of its existence, is able to it's able to look beyond, and not just beyond, is able to look before, after, below, above, beyond, in between, inside, because the elements, the materials that this cup is designed from is all part of the same matter. So inside of the cup, there are also space inside. So everything is made up of space and arrangement of atoms and electrons. So if this guy keeps if he remembers that the space is in fact limitless and it is not limited to the material forms, okay, then he is able to expand itself. It's able to expand his own self, and that expansion comes with more clarity. Okay, comes with all the good sensations that we always seek for. All right. So the self is the limited version of the infinite space. So if that infinite space tries to, let's say it's playing a game with itself, because it's not even it's not real, in the sense that everything is made out of sound. So sounds are happening, and then these sounds happening merge together to form a singularity, which is self-awareness. And then this self-awareness then of goes out from its own sound collection into different areas of sound collections. So a sound collection, self-aware sound collection, being able to move from here to here without destabilizing its own sound structure. I mean, it doesn't destabilize it at the very beginning, but depending on the environment, it can either stabilize, it can become more stabilized, or it can be destabilized. Okay? So what we call the self, which is silent of all forms of movement, is also the eternal space, is also the space, the eternal space in the moment. So we are not, even though we are made out of flesh and blood, our soul, our spirit comes from a different dimension where sound became self-conscious, because um, sound has to become self-conscious before it can move to other dimensions. And if you're not feeling, if you're feeling out of place where you are right now, then definitely your sound came from somewhere else. Okay, but even though it came from somewhere else, does not mean that you have to return back. Okay, we are we are at the crossroad um, where we are able to merge, or something new is about to be birthed, and that thing that is new comes from the collective, comes from our collective energy. So if I am thinking I positive thoughts processes and you are thinking the same, then collectively everybody who is thinking in that sense would kind of find themselves and merge. Okay, so definitely going to be a small community at the very beginning, but in time things becomes better. All right, so who you say you are is the compression of the eternal space, and that eternal space is not far away, it's not somewhere out there, it's the space right now that holds your body. Even though it seems so unbothered and it's kind of sleeping at the background of space, it is the overseer, it is the one that is running the whole show. Okay, and that is who you are in truth, limitless. So knowing who you are in truth, which is limitless, which is eternal, then you can come back to this experience of reality and redefine who you say the self is. Inside of the self, there is something called the ego that carries images, thoughts, emotions, feelings. You can begin to reinvestigate and then see what it is that you can change about yourself that would keep you in at a higher vibrational state. Okay, so I hope this video helped, and I'll see you in the next one.